Well, it's good to see you here. And if you're not here and you're online, then it's good to have you online. And we look forward to getting back together again. And let me get I'm technically challenged a lot if people laugh at me because it takes me so long to send back a text message. And so it takes me a while to boot up this thing. But I am happy to see you here. And I want to encourage you to not only be faithful to your church attendance, but reach out to those people who you don't see sitting next to you and say, hey, it's probably getting time. It's probably getting time that we all start coming back and not get too complacent. And that's something that we don't want to happen. And we're in this series in the book of John. It's a very interesting book. It's a very enlightening book. It's a book that's good for all of us to read and to understand and to listen to the stories and then say, what is there to learn for myself? And I was asked several weeks ago to preach on this Sunday, and I was told I'd be studying going over chapter 7 and to just read through it and see what God would lay on my heart. And as I read chapter 7, it just jumped out at me. Because the things that are happening in the life of Jesus in chapter 7, I see them as being the things that are applying to you and I today. They just parallel right side by side. And so I encourage you to open your heart, open your eyes, open your ears, and see this and say, okay, this is the lesson. And so let me just start off by making a statement that I think you'll all agree with, is every one of us wants to be liked. We have this built-in need, desire, longing for people to like us. No one wakes up in the morning and says to themselves, I hope everybody I come in contact today hates my guts. Right? It just doesn't happen. No one walks into the room and says, man, I just hope everybody in here hates me. We all want to be liked. But let me pose a question to you. At what cost are you willing to be liked? To what extent will you go to be liked? What will you refrain from doing, saying, or what will you do or say to be liked? This is a question we all need to struggle with and ask ourselves. How do we get the world to like us? Is a question that I hear once in a while. In fact, I hear it within the Christian community because we want to reach out to the world. And how do we get the world to like us? Well, the answer is actually very, very simple. Act like the world, and they will like you. It's really not that complicated. You want the world to like you, then act like the world, and they will like you. But see, the problem is getting the world to like us is a losing proposition for a Christian. Unless you're willing to sacrifice your beliefs. It's a losing proposition. It's not going to happen. It's the exact reason why the Romans in the first century hated the Jews. Because they kept trying to integrate them into their society. They kept trying to mold them to act like them, but the Jewish people had their own God, had their own way of worship, had their own beliefs, and it infuriated the Romans to the point where they started killing them. Well, the only way that the world is going to like you, and this is a promise, is if you fit into its mold. If you practice what it practices. If you adopt its philosophies and its beliefs. See, if the world does not hate you, it's because you are not a threat to them. And here's where we're headed today as we look at the life of Jesus. See, the story in chapter 7, at this point in Jesus' life, things are going really hard for Jesus. And I don't mean that they're going hard in that he's being physically beaten or hung on a cross. That's still yet to come. But I think in many ways what he's going through here and now is even more painful, because sometimes the emotional pain is worse than the physical pain. The pain of being rejected. Maybe many of you know exactly what that feels like. So let's start here in chapter 7 of John, and I've got this story I want to lay out to you, and I can't read the chapter's long. It's really long, but I'm going to pull out some key verses and then fit in the story between these key verses so we'll all be on the same page. It starts off in verse 1, says, after this. After this. Now, after this is talking about what happened in chapter 6. And in chapter 6, don't forget, that was so important what happened right there, because Jesus said some things that his followers and even some of his disciples did not understand. And as a result of them not understanding it, they fell away. They walked away. They rejected Jesus. His friends, his followers, even his own disciples rejected him and left. So after this, Jesus traveled around Galilee. He wanted to stay out of Judea, where the Jewish leaders were plotting his death. Okay, information here, key. He's staying away from Judea because in Judea are the what? The religious leaders who want to kill him. So he's staying away from there. But soon it was time for the Jewish festival of shelters. In verse 2 it says, the Jewish festival of shelters, one of the most important festivals that the Jewish people celebrate. It's the festival that celebrates remembering the time when they left the bondage of Egypt and then went into the wilderness, and it was there that God took care of them for 40 years. During the daytime, they would follow a pillar, a cloud of smoke, so God could lead them. In the nighttime, they would follow a bright, burning cloud. And they would actually build shelters during this festival and live in the shelters for 7 days. They would stay there. But soon it was time for the Jewish festival of shelters. Verse 3, and Jesus' brothers said to him, leave here and go to Judea where your followers can see your miracles. Now that sounds, when you first read it, like, oh, his brothers want him to show everybody that he's God. But you're missing what's really taking place here. What's really taking place is his brothers are ridiculing him. His brothers are taunting him. And don't miss this. It's his own brothers. And they're saying, hey, go down to Judea. Well, what's in Judea? We just read. It's where they want to kill him. It goes on in verse 4. You can't become famous if you hide like this! Exclamation mark. See the taunting going on here? If you can do such wonderful things, show yourself to the world. The sarcasm is just seeping from the pages here. Show yourself. And then verse 5 clues us in on what's taking place here. It says, for even his brothers didn't believe in him. Rejected by his own family. Reminds me of the passages that remind us as believers that Jesus didn't come to bring peace, but he came to bring division, a father among his own son, a mother among her own, or with her own daughter. This is what's going on. Verse 6 goes on. Jesus replied, he's talking to his brothers here, now it is not the right time for me to go, but you can go any time. Let's understand what this is saying. He's saying it's not the Father's timing for me to die on the cross, which I'm headed towards, but it's not the right time. And if I go to Judea, that's exactly what's going to happen right now. But you can go down there anytime you want. And the reason why they can go down there anytime they want is because they are not a threat to the world. They are not a threat to the religious leaders' system. It says in verse 7, the world can't hate you, but it does hate me because I accuse it of doing evil. The world doesn't hate you because you're not a threat. but it hates my guts and it wants to kill me because I accuse it of what it is doing is evil. When you side with the world has no reason to hate you. But when you oppose the world wants to destroy you. Verse 8. You go on. I'm not going to this festival because my time has not yet come. What actually ended up happening is the brothers left, and a few days later, the Jewish festival is about 7 days long. And about midway, the Bible tells us, into the festival, Jesus actually ended up going down to Judea, but it tells us that he did not go down there immediately publicly. It ended up becoming publicly, but not immediately in public view. So what's going on at the festival? We see in verse 12 of chapter 7. There was a lot of grumbling about him among the crowd. Some argued, he's a good man. But others said, he's nothing but a fraud who deceives the people. You see the crowd down there? Some are believing this is the promised Messiah. Others, no, he's not. He's a scoundrel. He's a fake. He's a fraud. Listen to what it says in verse 13. But no one had the courage to speak favorably about him in public, for they were afraid of getting in trouble with the Jewish leaders. They were afraid to speak up. They believed, but they were afraid to speak up and defend him. It reminds me of the story when Peter said to Jesus, I will never deny you. I will never reject you. And Jesus said to Peter, oh Peter, this very night before the rooster crows, you're going to deny even knowing me 3 times. Remember that story? And after the 3rd time, when Peter denied even knowing Jesus, the rooster crowed, and Jesus was there being beaten by the Roman soldiers, and he looks over his shoulders, and he looks at Peter, and Peter looks at him and just bows his head and starts weeping. And this is the type of thing that's going on here. No one would speak up. No one would come to his defense. Jump to verse 50. Then Nicodemus, we just heard about Nicodemus because Pastor Scott talked about him in chapter 3. Then Nicodemus, the leader who had met with Jesus earlier, spoke up. Now, don't forget who he is. Chapter 3 talks about him. He's one of the religious leaders who actually believed that this is the Messiah. But he knew that he was at odds with all the other religious leaders, so at nighttime he snuck over to talk to Jesus. Remember that conversation? And he said, what must I do to be saved? And Jesus said, you must be born again. Nicodemus really didn't know how to take that, have a true understanding, but he believed that he is the Messiah, and he spoke up here. Listen to what he says. Is it legal to convict a man before he is given a hearing? He asked. Now he's talking to the other religious leaders. He's putting his reputation at stake. Now he's not really defending Jesus, but he's kind of going around and doing it in the back door. He's not saying, hey, this guy's innocent, but he's saying, hey, you can't really convict somebody. So he's using the law to try to defend Jesus. You can't convict somebody without what? Giving them a fair trial. Is it legal to convict a man before he's given a hearing? They replied, meaning the other religious leaders, are you from Galilee too? That's where Jesus is from. Are you from Galilee too? Search the scriptures and see for yourself. No prophet ever comes from Galilee. They were so wrong. They were so wrong. They thought they were so smart. What they're basically saying is, hey, forget about the law. Nicodemus just brought up the law. He said, can you convict a man without giving him a fair trial? They don't care about that. Forget about the law. They just want him gone. And then they attack him. Now don't forget this, Christians. He is one of the religious leaders, and they turn on him. They attack their own. I couldn't help but think to myself, are you ready to stand up when those who are, quote, your friends, your peers attack you? See, the application for you and me today as we seek to be followers of Jesus, let me give you some things to think about. In chapter 3 of John, verse 19, and the judgment is based on this fact. This is the fact. God's light came into the world, but people loved the darkness more than the light, for their actions were evil. The light came into the world. Jesus Christ came into the world. But people rejected that light because they loved the darkness. Why do they love the darkness? Because they can hide in the darkness. Why are they hiding in the darkness? Because their actions are evil. See, as Christians, we've got to choose a side. We've got to choose a side. And you choose the world, and the world will love you, and you will reap all the benefits of the world. Money, friendship, prestige, easygoing. You go against the world, and it will come down on you like 100 pounds. John 15, same book, later on, verse 18, listen to what it says. This is all coming together. If the world hates you, remember that it hated me first. Jesus is speaking. If the world hates you, Christians, remember this. Jesus says that it hated me first. Sometimes we think, well, I just want to be a lover. I just want everybody to get along, and I just want to be a lover. The truth of the matter is, if you stand up for Jesus Christ, the world will not see you as a lover. The world will see you as a hater. They will label you a hater. They will label the things that come out of your mouth because you're standing up for Jesus Christ as hate speech, and they will condemn you. And that's exactly what they're going to do. Why did Cain kill his brother Abel? What did he do? Let me tell you what he did. He did what was right in the sight of God. And the world will want to come down on you for no other reason than you want to do what is right in the sight of God. Verse 19 of chapter 15, we're continuing on. The world would love you as one of its own if you belong to it. But you are no longer part of the world. I chose you to come out of the world, so it hates you. The world, that whole philosophy of sinful behavior and rejection of God and condoning evil, that's what's referred to as the world. And those who follow that practice and condone it, they will hate you. When you stand up for God's commandments, they will attack you. God's commandments now are viewed by many people as hate speech. And I believe that this passage, it's a reminder that the world is going to hate me the way that it hated Jesus. Now, if we as Christians could understand that, it would make life at least a lot more understanding to be prepared for the future. So I want to suggest that we prepare ourselves, that we stand firm to the end. That's a Bible, or a quotation in the Bible that's referred to over and over again. Stand firm to the end. See, every Christian needs to be careful not to compromise on what God says. And the reason why they're compromising is they're trying to fit in. Well, I know God says this, and this is, really what it means, but if I just compromise a little bit, if I just kind of come over here, because I don't want to offend anybody. I don't want anybody to reject me or to say that I'm hateful, so I'll just compromise a little bit. Right now, the world is pushing hard against Christians, against Christian views, against God's commandments. Right now, more than any time in my lifetime, there is a hard push against God and his people. trying to persecute those who will not be persuaded, are trying to change the mind of those who can be persuaded. Let me just give you a couple quick examples. The whole issue of abortion has been one that's been around for a very, very long time. But in my lifetime, I have never seen it being pushed as hard as it is right now. And if you are against abortion, which literally means killing a baby while it's in its mother's womb, okay, let's not play with words here. That's exactly what it means. If you are against it, then they will say you are against woman's rights. Of course, the Bible would teach us, and logic would say, well, what about the right of the baby who's being formed in that mother's wombs? What about them? 125,000 babies are killed every single day in the world by abortion. 1.3 million a year are killed in the United States. 4 out of 10 pregnancies in the United States end in abortion. They will call you a woman hater if you try to point that out. So your alternative is this: I'm going to stand up and fight for what's right, or I'm going to shut my mouth and let them push this on through. I don't know that we as Christians have an alternative except to stand up and fight against it. We must defend the unborn. How about the promotion of homosexuality becoming more and more prevalent, to the point to where we as Christians, we become almost complacent when it comes to abortion. We become complacent when it becomes homosexual agendas. We keep our mouths shut because we don't want to say anything that might stir people up. They'll label you as homophobic. What's going on right now is in our schools, they're indoctrinating our children because you're not telling them the truth, so they'll tell them. That's exactly what's going on. I see it more and more prevalent on TV, in advertisement. I just saw an advertisement for Captain America caption figure, the little figurine thing of Captain America, but now he's gay. I was reading a story about a father who disagreed with his 13-year-old daughter receiving testosterone because she wanted to be transformed into a boy. And the courts told him, you will either support this or you will go to jail for family violence. He went to jail because he would not support that. What about the whole idea of gender identity? These are things that as Christians we say, well, this is what God's word says. They're telling us that you cannot identify a newborn baby as being male or female because you don't know what they might choose in the future. Is this becoming ridiculous? But do you see what I'm saying? These are just common things. These are not hard things. These are things that now the church of Jesus Christ is now becoming complacent. Supposed to do away with any gender-specific terms such as mom or dad, because some people find that offensive. They indoctrinate our children in school when it comes to this. Women are forced to compete against biological males in sports. And of course, the males are just taking all the new world records. Is this crazy or what? 2 Timothy. Here's my point. Jesus suffered persecution because he pointed out sin, and as followers, we too will be persecuted. 2 Timothy 3:12 says this, yes, and everyone who wants to live a godly life in Christ Jesus will suffer persecution. Understand it. You want to live a godly life? You're going to suffer persecution. This is not about hate. This is not about Christians being hateful. In fact, don't fall into that lie. Just because you defend this does not mean you're hateful. It's about love. Do you love somebody enough to speak the truth to them? Or are you going to keep your mouth shut and allow them to die and go to hell? Are you going to speak the truth and try to defend this country, which was based on godly principles? Or are you just going to allow it to go by the wayside? It's about loving people, loving our country. The LA Times just did an article about Easter faith, condemning it. It also did another article about Good Friday, and it said this nation would be better off in a godless nation. Right now, Christian organizations are being sued because they will not allow their leadership to be non-Christian people. Well, obviously, we're being attacked. Limiting of speech of Christians is happening all the time. We see it being limited not only in books, where they'll pull books off if they disagree them off the shelves. We see it being limited in the internet. Label it as hate speech because they disagree with it. Limiting the Christian voice. Let me ask you this. James 4:4, you adulterers, don't you realize that friendship with the world makes you an enemy with God? Very clear. This is not Ron speaking, this is God speaking. I say it again, if you want to be a friend of the world, you make yourself an enemy of God. It can't get any clearer than that. How do we become an enemy of God? How do we become an enemy of God? Think about this for a moment. What do I have to do to become an enemy of God? Well, becoming a friend of the world, right? God says you can't have it both ways. Let me put it another way. How do you show hatred towards God? I mean, none of us want to show hatred towards God. I mean, it's almost scary. No, I would never want to show hatred towards God. But ask yourself the opposite question. How do I show love towards God? The Bible is very clear. The way I show love towards God is by obeying Him. Do you realize that the only physical evidence for a person to demonstrate his love to God is in his obedience to God? I love God in my heart. I'm just not doing what's right. The Bible doesn't allow that. I really do love Him. I just keep my mouth shut. Let me ask you, or just give you a couple quick things here to prepare yourself for the battle that's ahead. This is what we need to do as Christians. Understand you will not always understand God's ways. Okay? Understand this. Don't have a frame of mind. The moment I don't understand God, I'm out of here. Okay, then you might as well leave right now. You remember what happened right before chapter 7 and verse 6? Jesus said some things to His followers, to His disciples, and they found it hard to understand. They said, I'm out of here. You're not going to always understand God's ways. The real problem that we need to understand is real. And I don't know how to get around this except for you to understand I need to be strong even on my own. But the whole parable of Satan coming in and planting tares among the wheat, you understand what that's representing? You have Christians represented as the wheat, and tares are those who might proclaim to be Christians growing up alongside them, but they're the ones that cause the problems, and they're the ones that say, oh, okay, well, let's just go along with that. And then the other Christians look at that and say, well, they're Christians and they're going along with it, so I might as well go along with it. You understand you need to be strong on your own. Number 2, you will be required to stand alone. You will be required to stand alone. Just like Nicodemus. He was at a moment in time when he was defending Jesus, knowing who Jesus was, he was forced to stand alone. Now, sorry to say, but they made him shut his mouth. He kept quiet. But you will be required to stand alone. And I see this in Christian leaders' lives. It doesn't matter if you're a pastor. It doesn't matter if you're running the soundboard and you're working there, or you're up here leading worship, or back teaching children, but you're taking on some type of leadership. And understand this, you're going to be attacked. I see that I've got lots of Christian pastor friends attacked on a weekly basis. They can't win. Everything they do is wrong. If they go back to church, well, why are you doing that? That's wrong because of COVID. If they're not going back, well, that's wrong because you shouldn't be afraid of COVID. I mean, they just can't win about anything. What better device does Satan have than to get the church, his enemy, to not attend the gathering for over a year? I mean, he's got it down. And there are so many Christians right now who are falling into that trap. I can tell you personally, my greatest pains in life, and I've been in accidents, I've been in emergency rooms many times, I've had great physical pain, but my greatest pain has been emotional pain caused by people who what I would call my friend, who I would pastor, who I would spend hours with counseling, and they turn on you. And I'm telling you, you got to be able to stand alone. You got to be able to stand alone. And then I want to follow up the question to this. Are you one of those people who are support? Or are you the one who's just causing the problems? Are you one of those who has come alongside? And let me encourage you in this. You guys are doing a great job in the sound booth. Or the music sounds great. Or the pastor, that was a great sermon. Are you just there with another criticism? You got to be able to stand alone. My next one is this. Go to church. Go to church. I think we already hit that, right? Satan's hoping you don't. Satan's hoping you are so comfortable leaning back in that chair. Pretty soon you won't even be there. You're at home drinking a Pepsi. Go to church. This is where you are fed. This is where you meet with people. This is where you come together. This is where you are encouraged. It's so important. And then the last one, and this goes along with what's going to happen next week, but get baptized. Do you realize the first thing you're supposed to do after you get saved, after you accept Jesus Christ into your life, is to be baptized? What is baptism? It's acknowledging. It's invite your family, your friends. Hey, I'm going to get baptized. You come and watch me. I'm going down under the water. I'm being raised up to live a new life in Jesus Christ. The symbolism is dying to my own life, my old life of sin, identifying the death with Jesus Christ and rising to live a new life. That's what baptism is about. Do you realize in the first century when people took the step, and they didn't wait 6 months, a year to get baptized. They did it right now because that's what the Bible says to do. When they took that step to get baptized, they did it at great cost to themselves. I mean, they were coming down acknowledging their partnership with Jesus Christ, and they had their family on the bank saying, don't you dare. We will disown you. The person who gave them a job and employs them in a paycheck says, you do and I'll fire you. And they walked down in that water and they submerged and came up to live a new life in Jesus Christ at great cost. At great cost. And I just want to end reminding you that next week is an opportunity to be baptized. And if you're in this room and haven't been baptized, then do it. If you're sitting at home and you realize I haven't been baptized, or if I did it so long ago and I'm a changed person, then do it again. Acknowledge it. Show people that you're serious. Next week, get it done. And here's the question I give to you and to myself. Does the world hate you? And the thing that I'm going to tell you is it hates me too. And praise God for that. Would you pray with me?